Hello, I'm State Representative Kate Segal. Welcome to Capitol Comment, my public affairs show that brings the people of Calhoun County news from our state capital. I'm honored to represent you in Lansing and be the voice of the 62nd District in the state legislature. On our program today, we're going to be discussing food safety, food inspector training, and the importance of this issue to our community and our state and our health. Here to discuss this issue with me is Joan Bowman, Vice President for External Relations at the Global Food Protection Institute located in Battle Creek. Joan, welcome to the show and thanks for taking the time to join me.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Well, can you start off by explaining your role and what is the Global Food Protection Institute? It's kind of new in our area and one of our best kept secrets these days.
It is fairly new. We were established in 2009 and we were funded by the Kellogg Foundation, our startup funding. And our mission is to improve public health by improving food safety. And many people might not know this, but 48 million people each year get sick from contaminated food. And so to achieve our mission, we have established 3 initiatives. The first one's called the Emerging Technology Accelerator. And the accelerator looks at different technologies that rapidly identify contaminants in food.
Okay.
The second one is called Imagine Food Futures, and this is a series of conferences and symposia that bring the top and most experienced thought leaders in food safety together to talk about current issues and emerging issues. And our first conference is scheduled for May 1st and 2nd in Battle Creek.
Oh, great.
And then the third initiative, and the one that people know most about, is the International Food Protection Training Institute. The Training Institute trains inspectors and regulators from the government as well as industry to keep our food safe, and we're also working on a national curriculum framework.
That'd be great. So that means food inspectors all over the country would be getting the same type of training. And so if we're traveling from one restaurant to the next, the idea would be that you would know your food is safe because everybody's been trained the same way?
Exactly. That's one of our main goals, is to look at consistency and uniformity. When the foundation actually first studied this issue and whether or not they would even fund a food protection institute, there were 3 things that they found that were kind of surprising about training. One, there were no standards in the country.
Oh, wow.
There is no uniformity or consistency. And then, of course, budgets were so tight that even when state and local agencies wanted to train their people, oftentimes they couldn't afford to. So we were established to provide training as well as develop this new, as I said, national curriculum framework. So the curriculum wasn't even put together or organized. And we do it at no cost to government agencies.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, we've all heard about contamination issues, and we've seen it at, get down to a restaurant or down to a field. Does that mean our current system is broken and we need to completely rehash it, or are there just gaps in the system we need to be working on?
Well, like I said, it certainly does need to be improved. And again, a lot of the improvement can come by establishing these standards and making sure that we're not only training to standards, but that we're consistent. So that whether something is inspected by a federal, state, or local inspector, we can be assured that it's all the same. And then, and like you said, from what they call farm to fork. So whether you're looking at farming, harvesting, or whether the food is now moved in the supply chain to manufacturing or all the way to the retail, the grocery stores, we can assure that the people that are inspecting those facilities to make sure that they're clean and that our food is safe, that they're trained to do a good job.
So the Food Training Institute, or the training program of it, will do from the farm to the fork. It will encompass all of that training?
Yep.
So we're not just talking about the restaurants, we're talking about the whole gamut.
Exactly. For the
really neat.
first time, we are developing a national curriculum framework that has taken, well, we inventory, there are about 700 courses, food safety courses, that are out in the universe right now, and probably a lot more. But we have a group that we've put together and identified, and we are plugging them into a framework now so that whether you're an inspector of a farm or whether you're a feed inspector or a processing plant, or whether you inspect restaurants or grocery stores, you now have a career path that is laid out for you. So from entry level to what they call journey level, and then even leadership and technical level.
Wow, that's also good. How does this work in the sense of there are federal regulations, and we'll get to that in a little bit, and then we have state inspectors, and then we have local inspectors. Are these duplications, or are they looking at different things? How does that system work?
Well, and that's one of the things that the FDA is really looking at now, is this notion of an integrated food safety system, because whether an inspection is done by somebody at the federal level or whether the FDA contracts out those inspections to like state departments of agriculture or local departments, the key really is training, because that, as long as we can be assured that everyone is inspecting and trained to a standard, then we're not going to be duplicating, and we're not going to be missing things, and people really are going to be able to, will know that they're following best practices.
That's really good. Now, when we hear about contaminated vegetables or meat making it into our stores, and then we're buying those products, are those the only food safeties we as consumers are facing, or are there others out there we should be aware of?
Well, you're right. The problem with contaminants like pathogens like E. coli and salmonella and that kind of thing, those are, always a real hazard. But another thing that people maybe don't think of so often, but is also very important, are the allergens that can get into food. So again, you have to be able to make sure people are following best practices, whether that's the inspectors or the food handlers themselves, as well as developing these technologies that can rapidly identify if something does get into a finished product and gets on a shelf.
Wow, that would be. Now, are there anything else that we should be doing to prevent problems in our food supply and in our food service establishments?
Again, I think we really feel that training is the best operational solution to make sure that food inspectors and food processing people from the beginning to the end of the food chain, know what they're supposed to be doing. We've trained over 2,000 people at the Training Institute, and those folks have come from every state. We've representatives from every state except for one, and it's Arkansas. So I don't know.
We'll have to get on them.
We need to get someone from Arkansas to take the training. And we've also trained from a handful of countries as well. And we've also trained almost as many people on the industry side that we have from the government side. And so that is just so important to make sure that everybody's in the same room, everybody knows what's going on, and again, everyone is trained to the same standard. It's the best way that we can keep the food supply safe.
Yeah, and it is something, you said the statistic earlier in the program about how many people are affected by food poisoning each year in our country.
Yep, it is. Yeah, it's estimated that 48 million people become ill, 128,000 have to be hospitalized, and the numbers are 3,000 or so that die each year. And the economic cost, that's just the cost to public health, but the economic cost is estimated to be over $77 billion a year. So it's quite it's quite costly to the U.S., both in terms of illnesses and public health as well as the economic cost.
And we need to eat to be alive, so we want to make sure what we're eating isn't causing us to get sick or worse. So
exactly.
We will be back in just a few minutes to talk more about our food safety.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
Rosita, did you know there's a right way to sneeze?
Let's show them,
at you. This is how you act, this is what you do. Lift your arm up high, bend it toward your face. Sneeze right there in the bendy place. Achoo! You can do it with ease. Achoo! That's the right way to sneeze. Thank you.
To learn more about preventing flu, visit flu.gov.
When you earn your GED diploma, the barriers in your life fall. Take the first step and get free GED information in your area at 1-877-38-YOUR-GED or yourged.org. Earn your GED diploma and begin your brighter future.
Welcome back to Capital Comment. I'm State Representative Kate Segal. On this episode, we are talking about one of the all-important issues, which is food safety, and some of the problems with our current system. And part of that solution is the Global Food Protection Institute in Battle Creek. And I'm really pleased Joan Bowman is here to talk about these issues some more. So we talked about the government side of inspections in the first half, that there isn't this framework where everybody's trained to the same level with the same types of programming. But there are also private inspectors out there. So is there a different program that's available to private inspectors that's not to government inspectors?
Yep, what's called the third-party inspectors. They are a private industry that, hire folks that go in to, whether it's a big manufacturing plant or a big processing plant. So they're actually hired by industry to assess the situation at their facility and to try to get rid of any problems or, make sure that no food gets contaminated. So these are sort of a self-regulating form of inspection.
Okay.
It's not a government or federal or state government inspection.
But the idea is maybe that they're trying to use that so they are keeping up to the level of standards they're being inspected by and not have those problems when a government inspector comes in. Is that kind of their idea?
Yes, I mean that is the goal, that they're self-inspecting to keep the food supply safe, because industry of course wants to protect their brand. They don't want anyone to get sick, any more than the government regulators do.
Well, and unfortunately we know the economic impact of that locally when there's a problem at one of those plants with some of our cereal companies when the peanut butter scare happened, and that was just one company, I believe it was, that was supplying peanut butter, and it caused a ripple effect of
exactly
problems through our system. So
not only did a lot of folks get sick from the outbreak that occurred at the Peanut Corporation of America, that's
okay.
the one that you're speaking of, which was a supplier to some of the cereal companies in our area. But I believe it cost over $55 million to just one company to recall all that product that got through.
Wow.
And even though it may not have had any contaminants in it, they were operating on what they call an abundance of caution.
Right.
Because again, they didn't want anyone to get sick. They would rather pull the product and take the economic hit rather than risk someone gets sick or die.
Well, and that is the nice side of it, but again, that is a huge expense for a company, especially in these times, to have to do that.
Exactly.
So do the private inspectors have separate coursework that they take or standards that they live up to, or are they just trained privately by those companies to do the inspections based on what FDA rules are out there?
Well, I'm not an expert on third-party inspections, but it's my understanding that they do go through their own training process, and that training process is not up to any kind of standard. There is no uniform standard basically right now. So regardless of where you get your training or where you learn how to inspect a facility, there is nothing out there, which is why we are, as FDA's lead training partner, working on integrating this system so that we're all up to the same standards, because that is really the best and most cost-efficient way, actually, of making sure that our food supply remains safe.
I mean, and this is just, you think this stuff happens because we are so advanced. We have all this food going back and forth. But to know that that hasn't existed, and they're, located in Battle Creek, providing this national framework and international now on keeping our food supply safe is really neat. Was there a reason Battle Creek was chosen?
Well, yes, actually. I mean, well, for one reason, we were funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, so that's one reason
helps.
why we're in Battle Creek, yes. But also, the project was to build, it was an economic development strategy in the beginning to revitalize downtown Battle Creek. So the Global Food Protection Institute was just one of 4 main areas that the Kellogg Foundation was funding to establish our role in food science, food technology, and food education, because, as you know, that's our history.
Right.
The Kellogg Company headquarters is in Battle Creek. We've got Post, we've got Raw Corp, and we really, now with the addition of the Covance lab, you're really starting to get this critical mass of people in Battle Creek that are all interested in protecting the food supply. It's actually really exciting.
It is, and I find it absolutely fascinating. Just talking about what a company has to do to get the quality of product just for a box of cereal, and where they have to get that supply from. And they want to make sure that the supply is consistent and safe, so they don't have these millions of dollars recall. But that whole process is so complicated. And then to know that there wasn't this national framework on top of that is just amazing that we do have successful food companies with all that work that goes into it.
Exactly. Our food supply is more interconnected now than it has been at any time. We get our food from all over the world.
We definitely do. And sometimes that can be scary.
Right.
How does somebody go about becoming a food inspector? We talked a little bit in the first half that you're putting together a career path for these individuals, but we do look at this. There seems to be, there will be a need for this in the future. How do you go about getting interested and started in this?
Well, most folks enter this field, they come in with a bachelor's degree, usually in the area of science like microbiology or biology. And then they take a job with a state Department of Health or a local community health organization, and they become a food inspector. And sometimes those inspections even encompass environmental inspections. Okay. But then, so if they're a food inspector, they start by taking FDA online courses that are required. But then after that, the training usually becomes a little spotty. And it's, again, contingent on budgets, it's contingent on staffing and all kinds of things. So training is just so important at that level, because education, or someone with a bachelor's degree that has an education, is great. Right. But education is very different from training. So to have a degree in microbiology does not ensure that you know how to walk into a manufacturing plant and inspect it. People have to be trained. How do you sample for E. coli? If you're looking for listeria, where do you look? What are the best practices? What are the people in the plant supposed to be doing? So again, the education piece is great as a background, but we're all about training people to a standard so that we can make sure that the facilities, again, from the beginning all the way to the end of the food chain, are safe.
Now, you also talked about the different levels of food inspectors, that you have the start out, and then you have all the different areas of inspection. You have a training that you're setting up for all those different areas. So is there, when you want to make this into a career, are they doing continuing education to get to those levels? Or even if they stay at a level, are you creating a continuing education type program for inspectors?
Yeah, in fact, most of the courses that we offer at the Training Institute are what you would call continuing education. So they're after this very early entry level of online courses. So again, the National Curriculum Framework, it has a grid for the entry level, then the journey, the technical and leadership, but then it also maps out a path, whether you're a feed inspector, maybe you need to have this set of courses. If you're a retail inspector, maybe you need these. If you're inspecting a dairy farm, you're going to need a whole other set of courses. And then there's always courses that would, span that everybody would need to know.
Right.
So, communications, how to deal with outbreaks, how to deal with a crisis of some kind. Maybe there are certain courses that everyone needs to know. So, that is what we're working with or working for right now. And it's never been done. It's the first time it's ever been put together. We're very, very proud of it.
It's very exciting. I think you need to add the homeowner or the home cook class to that as well online.
Right.
Most accidents are still happening in homes, so that would be nice as well because, you think you're getting your food prepared, but you're not really paying attention to how long that food's been out or what you're doing with the chicken in your kitchen. But we can work on that later.
Right.
Are there areas where the government needs to supply some more regulations in this area since it is so, there aren't the standards? Are you guys also working on what needs to happen from a legal perspective and what laws we may need for this?
Well, last January, so not last month, but a year ago, President Obama signed the Food Safety Modernization Act. And this legislation was the first time that the laws and the regulations governing our food supply had been revamped or overhauled since 1938, if you can believe it. It's been
1938.
a long time since the federal regulations had been totally overhauled.
Oh my goodness.
So you can imagine all the changes that have taken place, how outdated they were, right?
Right.
So, those legislation or those changes have given the FDA a lot more authority now to not just protect and regulate the food supply here in the U.S., but also to protect or to look at and to make sure that the food coming in from all these countries all over the world is safe. Because again, the whole goal is integration, at all these different levels.
Right.
And it's interesting because since this legislation has passed, the International Food Protection Training Institute is now really living up to its name. We're really soon becoming international.
Right.
Because the interest from all over the world now has just grown, because countries now want to know, how does this legislation affect their ability to get their products into the U.S.?
Okay.
What has changed now? Can they still get their products in? What do they have to do differently? And they're asking, our help and guidance with the FDA so that they can make the changes they need. So basically for their exporting purposes, but also to improve the food and the safety of the food in their own countries.
That is really neat. So that was the first time since 1938, and a lot of changes has been happening to our food supply since then. That's amazing.
Exactly.
We do need that. I do want to take a moment to also suggest to our viewers that they visit the Michigan Department of Agriculture's website for information on our state food safety laws and information about food recalls and other food safety issues. There is a Michigan food safety link on the left that you can then click on Michigan food law and see the law that was passed in 2000, changes that were made in 2005, and upcoming changes. The House Agricultural Committee just reported out a bill that would put into Michigan code, Michigan law, the now national food safety changes that were made and make those stronger by putting that in Michigan law as well. So for our viewers, I encourage them to go and look at those upcoming changes. It still has to go through the Senate, but I have a feeling it will, and it will make some changes to how people have to handle their food and work with them. But I think we did this in a bipartisan fashion, so I'm hoping it will be a help to all of our statewide food suppliers and restaurants instead of a hindrance. So I'm excited about that too for Michigan.
Great.
So when we go into grocery stores and we buy our food, is there things that we need to be looking at besides just the expiration date with what's happening with our food supply?
Well, labels are very important, to read the labels and make sure that you know what's in it and the correct way to prepare the food. Cooking is very important, to always cook the food to the proper temperature.
Right.
And refrigeration and chilling is also very important because keeping food cold, afterwards will slow the growth of bacteria. So those things are very important, once the food gets into your family's home.
Yeah, definitely want to keep that up. Are there things that you recommend or the Institute is recommending that we're helping our children with these days? I mean, my daughter's been cooking with me now for several years, and we do the hand washing and change the cutting boards. But, are there some ideas that we have for keeping our children and letting them learn important safety habits?
Well, hand washing, it's
the big one.
It is. It's the number one that I always bring up. It's just so important to prevent the spread of germs, at any time of year. So that's obviously number one. But also when you talk about children and their eating habits and cooking habits, children should never be given undercooked or raw meat products. Or egg products,
Okay.
or anything that has raw eggs in it, like cookie dough or anything like that. Hamburgers should always be ordered well done. If you're a restaurant and they ask you for kids, they should always be ordered well done. And the same with eggs. Kids really shouldn't eat sunny side up. You should always make sure you cook the yolks. Again, because a lot of these pathogens are called, or contamination germs in food, can be killed once they're cooked to the proper temperature. So even if you were to get some ground beef that had E. coli, if you cook it to the proper temperature and it's not rare, you would kill that pathogen.
Oh, that's
and
really good.
again, that's very good. The proper way to cook food and the proper chilling is so important too, to keep the food safe.
And especially important with children who are they're smaller. So if they do get some of those contaminations in their body, it does affect them more. So
Kids normally or sometimes don't have as strong as an immune system, and so the contaminants can really affect children much more severely than some adults, although adults can get just as sick from food poisoning.
Been there, unfortunately. And that is the fun part. We can help teach our children more patience to wait for that cookie dough to become a cookie before they take into that.
Right.
But good luck keeping those little fingers out of there. But thank you, Joan. And thank you for watching this episode of Capital Comment. I'd like to thank my guest, Joan Bowman from the Global Food Protection Institute here in Battle Creek, for joining me today. And thank you, Joan, for sharing so much wonderful and important information for our community. I look forward to another discussion soon about a topic that affects the quality of life here in our community and throughout the state. I also encourage you to, again, look for more information on food safety and how important it is by going to the Michigan Department of Agricultural's website. Again, they have a link that you can click on called Michigan Food Law to understand what our state has in regards to regulations, and keep your eye out for the new laws that are going to be passed shortly in the Michigan State Legislature. Now, I look forward to another discussion soon about a topic that affects the quality of life here in our community and throughout the state. I encourage you to contact me if you have any questions or concerns, or if I can be of any help to you. You can always contact me through my website at repsegal.com, where you can also sign up for my e-newsletter, and you can call me toll-free at 888-347-8062. It continues to be an honor to serve as your voice in Lansing, and I look forward to talking with you again next time. Until then, good night and goodbye.